Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a place your shoes are not prepared for. You are standing at the edge of a medieval town just as morning nudges the fog away, and the first thing you notice is the ground. It isn't really a road so much as a shared agreement between mud, straw, and whatever fell there yesterday. Your modern instincts already feel a little nervous, and honestly, you probably won't survive this, but that's part of the charm. The gates creak open ahead of you, tall and wooden, blackened where iron hardware has sweated rust for decades. You step forward and immediately understand that gravity is not your friend here. Every footstep sinks slightly, pulling at your boots as if the street itself has opinions about you arriving. Hardened ruts from carts weave like lazy rivers, filled with rainwater, refuse, and a sheen you'd rather not identify too closely. Already, your brain tries to categorize the smell. Earthy, animal, human, something vaguely cabbage adjacent. This is a real medieval city street, the kind historians agree most townspeople navigated daily. There is no strict separation between walking space and dumping space. Chamber pots are emptied with casual enthusiasm. Slaughter waste finds its way from butcher stalls to gutters that are more theoretical than engineered. A mainstream historical fact settles in gently. Most medieval cities lacked organized sewage systems, relying instead on open drains that ran down main streets. You walk beside one now, pretending not to notice it, gently murmuring to itself. Above you, buildings lean inward like gossips sharing secrets. Timber frames creak, upper floors jutting out farther than the ones below, blocking a generous amount of sunlight. Laundry hangs between windows, stiff linen shirts dripping yesterday's rinse water onto your head. No one apologizes. In fact, no one seems to notice. This is simply how it is. Your shoulders instinctively hunch, as if that might help you blend in and avoid another sudden splash. The street is alive with sound. Iron-shod hooves on stone, vendors shouting the virtues of their bread, which is brown, dense, and proudly not fresh. Somewhere, a blacksmith's hammer rings with a steady patience that feels almost soothing, like a medieval white noise machine. If you listen closely, beneath it all, you hear coughing. It's constant, low, wet, tired. Your first subconscious note, respiratory issues will not be a fun side quest here. You pass a bakery, drawn in by warmth more than scent. Bread in this era is the backbone of survival, and it shows. Flour dust coats every surface like pale snow. Here's a quirky tidbit for you to tuck in. Medieval bread sometimes contained bits of grit from stone milling, which slowly wore down people's teeth over time. You chew carefully, even though you're not eating yet, just thinking about it. Your jaw already feels preemptively offended. Pigs wander freely, snouts to the ground, acting as both garbage disposal and community mascot. One brushes past your leg, utterly unconcerned with consent. This isn't neglect. This is urban planning, medieval style. Animals roam because they serve a purpose, even if that purpose is eating things you'd rather not name. Historians still argue whether these roaming animals significantly reduced waste or simply redistributed it more creatively. You try not to stare, but the people hold your attention. Faces are weathered beyond their years. A woman who looks 40 might barely be 25. Children weave through the crowd carrying baskets, already part of the working rhythm of the street. Clothing is practical, wool mostly, in muted tones stained darker at the hems. Everyone smells faintly of smoke because everything smells of smoke. Open hearths mean soot in the air, in the lungs, in the folds of daily life. You notice how often people touch their faces, wipe their noses with sleeves, scratch at unseen irritations. Lice are common companions here, equal opportunity guests who care little about class distinctions. Quick joke number one drifts by gently. Your conditioner back home is weeping softly in a plastic bottle, knowing what you're about to endure. A man walks past, carrying a bucket, glancing upward, then tipping it out with satisfying finality. You flinch just in time. This is your first near miss. In some towns, shouting a warning before dumping waste becomes customary, though enforcement is spotty at best. A mainstream fact slides in like a cautious step. Municipal regulations about waste do exist in some medieval cities, but they are unevenly applied and often ignored when inconvenient. You breathe through your mouth. This turns out to be a mistake. There's a rhythm to the chaos, though. Once your senses stop shouting, you begin to hear it. Life flows at a communal pace. People know each other. Even arguments feel rehearsed, familiar, like reruns you didn't choose. A fishmonger and a customer bicker loudly, both clearly enjoying the performance. Gentle sarcasm sneaks in. At least comment sections haven't been invented yet. You pause near a well set into a small square. Water carriers queue patiently, wooden buckets knocking against knees. The water looks fine, clear enough. Trustworthy is another matter. For now, you simply note how central this spot is to the day's survival. This well is gossip hub, news source, and mild existential risk all in one tidy circle. Your modern body keeps offering alerts. You're cold near the ground, warm near your head, damp everywhere else. Your back already aches from unconsciously bracing yourself. You haven't worked yet, you haven't eaten, you haven't been sick today. The day is young, and that realization lands softly but firmly. As you stand there, absorbing the scene, it gets harder to imagine retreat. The city doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It hums along, indifferent and intimate at the same time. This is the texture of medieval life, not epic battles or grand halls, but this street, this smell, this shared understanding that survival is ordinary work. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling cozy enough, drop your location and local time down in the comments. Somewhere in the world, you're listening while wrapped in blankets instead of damp wool, and honestly, that feels worth appreciating. The noise slowly becomes background. Your breathing settles. You stop tracking every footstep and start drifting with the flow of people around you. This is only the first few minutes of your day, and already the city has tested you gently, almost kindly. Ahead, food waits, work waits. Toothaches, thirst, and questionable hygiene wait patiently too. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The street stretches forward, and you follow it, one careful step at a time. You drift forward from the street, and without any real announcement, food becomes the main character of your day. Hunger arrives early in medieval life, not as a dramatic growl, but as a steady, familiar companion that never really leaves. You realize this as you follow the smell of boiling grain toward a low building where steam curls lazily from an open doorway. This is breakfast, or something like it, and your expectations quietly lower themselves in self-defense. Inside, a pot hangs over a fire, thick contents stirred with a wooden paddle worn smooth by generations of boredom. Porridge, gruel, pottage. The name changes depending on who you ask, but the experience remains lovingly consistent, hot, filling, and deeply unimpressed by your modern palate. A mainstream historical fact settles in calmly. Most medieval people, especially peasants, ate grain-based meals multiple times a day, flavored lightly if at all. Bread and boiled cereal carry entire lives on their starchy backs. You're handed a bowl. It's wooden. It smells faintly of smoke and yesterday's dinner, which may or may not also have been porridge. The texture is somewhere between soup and regret. You take a small spoonful, polite at first, then a larger one when you realize this is not optional. Food is fuel here, not entertainment. No one asks how it tastes, no one waits for a reaction. Eating is something done efficiently, like tying shoes or sighing. There is bread, too. Dark, dense, and satisfying in a way that feels physical rather than joyful. This isn't the fluffy bread you know. It's built for survival. Sometimes it's baked once, then baked again to harden it for storage. Your jaw gets a workout, and somewhere in the distance, future tooth pain raises its hand and introduces itself. Remember those stone-milled grains from earlier? They're back, and they're crunchy in a way bread was never meant to be. A quirky tidbit slides in with your second bite. Medieval cooks sometimes thickened food with ground peas or beans instead of flour, giving meals a heavier, almost glue-like consistency. You chew thoughtfully, appreciating how calm your life felt 5 minutes ago. Light joke number 1 drifts by. Your favorite comfort food just unfollowed you. Meat is not the star here. It appears occasionally, like a guest who is impressive mostly because they're rare. For most people, meat shows up on feast days or not at all. When it does arrive, it's often preserved, salted, smoked, or dried, changing both flavor and smell in ways that require enthusiasm you haven't yet developed. Fish is more common, especially in towns near rivers, and religious fasting days ensure that half the week is quietly meat-free whether you like it or not. You notice people adding bits of onion, cabbage, or herbs to their bowls. This is customization medieval style. Garlic makes frequent appearances, not just for flavor, but because people believe it has protective qualities. Historians still argue whether medieval dietary choices were more influenced by nutrition, availability, or lingering classical ideas about balancing bodily humors. You just nod thoughtfully and take another bite. There's a sense of rhythm to meals. People eat together often, sharing dishes, tearing bread from a common loaf. Personal plates are a luxury. Spoons are treasured. Knives serve double duty at table and workbench. Forks are rare and suspicious in many places, considered an unnecessarily pointy suggestion from foreign lands. You eat carefully, aware that etiquette exists but is forgiving compared to your own table manners. No one minds if you slurp. In fact, slurping suggests enjoyment, which feels optimistic but polite. Street food calls out as you wander again. Pies with unknown fillings steam gently on wooden trays. These pies are containers more than cuisine, sturdy pastry shells meant to hold hot meat juices without complaint. Sometimes people don't even eat the crust. They use it as a bowl, then pass it along to someone poorer once the filling is gone. Efficient, slightly haunting, comforting in a practical way. You stop near a vendor selling roasted chestnuts. They smell warm and sweet, almost familiar, and for a moment you relax. Food like this bridges centuries easily. Nuts, apples, berries, when available, feel like small miracles. Seasonal eating isn't a trend, it's law. When supplies run low, the menu shrinks quietly, without complaint or substitutions. Drink arrives next. Ale, in various strengths, flows freely. Water exists, yes, but trust is relative. Brewing kills bacteria, so ale becomes the safer option in many towns. Even children drink weak versions. You take a sip. It's flat, slightly sour, and deeply earnest. Historians still argue whether medieval ale was actually safer than water in all cases, but no one here is asking modern questions. You finish the cup. Another light joke wanders through. Hydration has chosen a personality, and it's mildly fermented. Spices show up rarely for you, but you hear about them constantly. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, symbols of wealth, distance, and prestige. When a pinch appears in someone's meal, it's noticed, talked about, respected. Food becomes a quiet social signal, a way to read someone's status without asking. Your own bowl says everything it needs to say. As the meal winds down, hunger loosens its grip, but doesn't leave entirely. That's normal. You're meant to feel a little empty. It keeps you moving. People rise, wipe hands on sleeves, return bowls without ceremony. No one lingers dramatically. There's work to do, and food is simply one anchor point in the day. You step back into the street, belly warm, mouth still tasting grain and smoke. You're fueled now, in the medieval sense of the word. Enough energy to labor, enough patience to continue. Enough realism to understand that food here will never thrill you, but it will keep you alive longer than you expected. Barely. With your stomach no longer protesting quite so loudly, your attention drifts somewhere more basic, more urgent. Thirst sneaks up on you. It always does. You feel it as a dry pause at the back of your throat, a reminder that you've just eaten a bowl of warm grain that politely absorbed every drop of moisture in your body and asked for more. You follow the slow gravity of daily life toward water. The well from earlier waits patiently in a small open square, its stone lip worn smooth by countless hands. Rope creaks softly as buckets rise and fall in a steady, practiced rhythm. This is the heart of the neighborhood, not because it's beautiful, but because survival quietly depends on it. A mainstream historical fact settles in here. Most medieval towns relied on shared wells or local water sources, drawing water manually and carrying it home in heavy containers. Plumbing, as you know it, is still a very distant dream. You watch someone draw a bucket and lean in. The water looks clear enough. Sunlight flickers across the surface, and for a moment your modern brain tries to relax. Clear means clean, right? The past doesn't answer. Instead, it hands you a wooden cup and waits. The well is surrounded by life. Children chase each other between water carriers. Someone pauses their work just long enough to share news. A woman scrubs linen against a stone nearby, soap made from rendered fat and ash creating a thin, stubborn foam. Every drop of water is worked hard here. Nothing flows without effort. You become suddenly aware of how often you turn a tap without thinking and feel a small, temporary gratitude settle in your chest. You sip. It's cool, with a mineral edge that feels grounding rather than refreshing. There's no immediate alarm, which is both reassuring and suspicious. Wells vary wildly in quality depending on location, depth, and nearby contamination. And there is always nearby contamination. Latrines, animal pens, refuse pits. Medieval cities layer necessity tightly together. Historians still argue whether people understood the connection between waste and waterborne illness, or whether they simply noticed patterns and adapted without explanation. You try not to dwell on it. Water carriers move with practiced strength, poles balanced across shoulders with buckets swaying gently at each end. It's impressive in a quiet way. Children help when they can, learning early that hydration is a group project. Carrying water is one of the most time-consuming tasks of the day. Suddenly, drinking feels less casual, more intentional. Not everyone relies on wells. Rivers snake past towns, offering abundance and anxiety in equal measure. You walk closer to the riverbank, where muddy footprints give away frequent trips. Fishers clean their catch nearby, scales flashing briefly before slipping into the water. Upstream, you vaguely remember things. Washing, waste, something involving a pig. The water doesn't remember these things at all. People drink from rivers anyway. They bathe there, wash clothes, rinse tools. The river accepts everything with the same patient indifference. A quirky tidbit drifts in. In some medieval cities, specific sections of rivers were unofficially designated for different uses. Washing upstream, waste downstream, based more on tradition than enforcement. Results, predictably, varied. You consider boiling water. Sensible, logical, not common. Fuel costs money, time, energy. Most people save heat for cooking food, not improving drinks. Ale steps in again here, a supporting character who refuses to leave the stage. Brewing is normal. Household brewing is common. Weak ale, small beer, table beer, names change, strength varies, trust remains relatively high. You accept a cup. It's barely alcoholic, cloudy, faintly sour. Not unpleasant, just sincere. It settles easier than the water did, which tells you more than you want to know. Light joke number 1 floats by slowly. Your fitness app just fainted. The day warms slightly, and thirst returns with persistence that feels personal. You notice how often people drink, in small amounts, throughout the day. There's an unspoken respect for fluids here, a quiet understanding that dehydration makes everything harder. Survival is built on small, repetitive acts done without applause. You pass a public fountain, more decorative than functional, built by a wealthy patron seeking goodwill and heavenly favor in equal parts. The water trickles continuously, a rare luxury. People gather, filling jugs, trading smiles, occasionally arguing politely about whose turn it is. Clean water becomes social glue. Not all sources are equal, and reputation matters. People know which wells make them sick and which merely taste odd. Stories circulate quietly, passed along with practical seriousness. Avoid that one after rain. Don't drink there in summer. That place is cursed, not spiritually, just inconveniently. Language fills in where science doesn't yet sit. You start to feel a mild heaviness in your limbs, not illness, fatigue. Carrying yourself through this environment takes more energy than expected. Hydration helps, but rest is rare. There are no disposable bottles, no electrolytes, no lemon slices waiting somewhere off camera. There is only repetition and trust. Nearby, a man rinses a wound with well water, grimacing. No soap, no antiseptic, just hope and habit. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine's emphasis on balance did more harm or good in everyday treatment. You look away gently, protecting your mood. PG-13 survival mode remains active. The square slowly empties as people return to work. You take one last drink, swallowing carefully, and set the cup aside. Your relationship with water has changed forever, or at least for today. It is no longer invisible. It's effort, risk, relief. You move on. Throat cool, thoughts softening. The city breathes around you, and, somewhere in the distance, another well waits patiently, like it always has. As the day stretches onward, something small but persistent begins to tap at your awareness. It's not hunger this time, and it's not thirst. It's a dull pressure behind your smile, a quiet ache that blooms gently along your jaw. You shift it aside at first, blaming the bread, the ale, the general inconvenience of existing here. But the sensation stays. Your teeth are reminding you that they exist. And in medieval times, that's rarely good news. You touch your mouth, instinctively, then stop when you realize no one else does. Tooth pain here is so common it barely earns a sigh. Smiles are cautious things. People chew on one side. Faces tilt slightly when eating, as if everyone has an agreement with discomfort they don't bother explaining anymore. A mainstream historical fact settles in calmly. Dental care in the Middle Ages is minimal, and tooth decay is widespread. Coarse bread, stone-ground flour, and limited oral hygiene conspire quietly. Sugar exists, but not in the refined abundance you know. Still, decay doesn't need candy to thrive. Time, grit, and neglect do just fine on their own. You spot a barber surgeon's sign hanging from a nearby building. The striped pole isn't just decorative, it signals bloodletting, shaving, and various small medical interventions. Dentistry falls under this general umbrella of hopeful discomfort. You step closer, curiosity tugging harder than caution. Inside, it smells sharply of herbs, iron, and something medicinal adjacent. Tools line the wall. Some are recognizable. Others feel better left unexplained. The barber surgeon looks up, meets your eye, and offers a nod that suggests he has solved many problems exactly once. Tooth extractions are the main solution here. No fillings, no root canals. If a tooth hurts badly enough, it comes out. The procedure is fast, direct, and deeply reliant on restraint rather than anesthesia. Occasionally, alcohol is involved, but more for bravery than numbness. You swallow reflexively and decide your ache can wait. A quirky tidbit drifts in softly. Some medieval remedies recommend rubbing a mixture of crushed herbs, vinegar, or even burned sage into the gums to ease pain. Effectiveness varies. Confidence does not. You imagine yourself earnestly rubbing plant paste into your mouth and feel modern skepticism war gently with desperation. Outside again, you notice how people manage pain creatively. Chewing cloves when available. Holding warm stones against the jaw. Muttering prayers softly. Humor helps too. Someone jokes about losing a tooth as a sign of wisdom. No one disagrees loudly enough to break the illusion. Children show gaps in their smiles early. Baby teeth fall out, adult teeth struggle to thrive. There's less emphasis on cosmetic perfection and more on functionality. If you can chew, you're doing well. If you're missing teeth, you adapt. Food softens accordingly. Porridge earns fresh respect. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced more dental pain overall than early modern populations, or if the rise of refined sugar later made things worse. The debate lounges quietly in the background while you swirl your tongue around your teeth, cataloging potential future regrets. Oral hygiene exists, just not as you know it. Some people rinse with water or wine, others chew on sticks to freshen breath and mechanically clean teeth, an early ancestor of the toothbrush, though enthusiasm is optional. Mint and parsley appear not just in cooking, but tucked discreetly behind lips for social interactions. You admire the effort. Your ache flares briefly, then settles. It won't leave entirely. That's the theme here. Discomfort becomes background noise, blended into the soundtrack of daily life, like the blacksmith's hammer or the well's creaking rope. No one panics over pain unless it stops them from working, and even then, options are limited. Light joke number 1 floats lazily through your mind. Your dentist back home just felt a chill and doesn't know why. As you walk, you pass someone grimacing quietly, jaw swollen, face drawn. There's sympathy, but also distance. Illness and pain are familiar enough to respect, distant enough to fear catching. You keep moving, grateful your ache is mild, for now. You begin to realize how interconnected everything here is. Food texture affects teeth. Teeth affect diet. Diet affects health. Health affects labor. Labor keeps you alive. One weak link echoes forward. Dental pain isn't just a personal issue, it's a survival variable. By late afternoon, the ache fades into a quiet hum. Or maybe you just get used to it. That happens too. You breathe out slowly, accepting the truce. There's still daylight, still work, still time before night brings its own negotiations. As you move on, jaw relaxed as much as it's willing to be, you understand something gently but clearly. In medieval times, your teeth are not cosmetic features. They're tools. And like all tools here, they wear down faster than you'd hope. With your teeth respectfully quiet for the moment, the day nudges you onward into its real purpose. Work doesn't begin with a clear signal here. No clocks chime the hour, no calendars buzz reminders. Labor simply starts when light does. And since the sun is up and you're still breathing, congratulations, you're already late. You drift toward the fields beyond the town walls, or maybe a workshop tucked between leaning houses. Your role depends mostly on where you were born and who you know. Social mobility exists, but it moves at the pace of erosion. A mainstream historical fact settles in. The vast majority of medieval people work in agriculture or manual trades, and most labor is physically demanding, repetitive, and unavoidable. You take hold of a tool. It's heavier than you expect, worn smooth by other hands that once learned the same weight through sore muscles. Wood handles splinter slightly. Iron edges dull faster than you'd like. Tools are precious, repaired endlessly rather than replaced. You grip carefully, aware that blisters are not considered injuries, just proof you're doing it right. The hours stretch without ceremony. You bend, lift, rake, carry, hammer, or stir, depending on where you've drifted. Movement becomes rhythmic. Breath aligns with effort. There's a strange calm baked into the repetition, almost meditative if your back doesn't object too loudly. There are no earbuds, no podcasts, but the sounds around you fill the gap. Birds, wind, voices, occasional arguments about whose fault something very predictable is. Breaks exist, quietly. People pause to drink, to stretch cramped fingers, to exchange a few words. Laughter pops up unexpectedly, dry and quick, like kindling catching. You realize work here isn't silent or grim most of the time. It's communal. Everyone shares the same exhaustion, and that creates its own low-level bond. Light joke number 1 drifts through your tired arms. Your gym membership would like to have a word with your expectations. Not all work happens outdoors. You step into a workshop and feel immediate warmth. A potter spins clay with slow confidence. A weaver tends a loom that creaks like it has opinions. Craft labor demands focus and patience rather than pure strength, though your posture will still complain later. Apprentices hover, watching hands more than faces, absorbing motions they'll repeat for years before mastery feels deserved. Work hours shift with the seasons. Summer days stretch long, demanding nearly every usable minute of daylight. Winter compresses effort, though the cold swaps physical exertion for endurance. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants actually worked more hours annually than modern workers, or if feast days, holy days, and weather interruptions provided more rest than we typically imagine. Right now, it feels like the answer depends entirely on your lower back. Speaking of holy days, there are many, more than you'd expect. Saints' days, feast days, observances that punctuate the calendar with pauses. On those days, work slows or stops entirely, replaced by church, food, and cautiously enthusiastic celebration. Today is not one of those days. Today is a normal day, which is almost harder. Your hands ache, your shoulders warm. Sweat forms and doesn't evaporate quickly under wool layers. Water helps, ale helps. Complaining does not. People here conserve energy carefully, including emotional energy. You notice how rarely anyone frames work as unfair. It just is. Fighting it would take more out of you than bending into it. A quirky tidbit slips in like a breath. Some medieval laborers developed highly specialized skills so specific that they were valuable across regions, like expert thatchers or millwrights, sometimes traveling long distances for seasonal work. You imagine yourself announcing this as a career goal and immediately needing a nap. Lunch is brief and familiar. Leftover bread, a ladle of pottage. You sit on the ground, leaning against a wall that has seen centuries of identical pauses. Conversation stays light. Jokes circle familiar targets. Weather, tools, local politics delivered with resignation rather than rage. Someone complains about a lord raising dues. Someone else shrugs. Change happens slowly here. Complaints travel faster than solutions, but neither move quickly. Back to work. Time blurs. Movements repeat. Muscles settle into a dull, cooperative ache. You sense how this labor shapes bodies over years. Broad shoulders, strong forearms, joints that weather early. Youth is a short phase here. Capability matters more than age. As afternoon edges toward evening, shadows lengthen and the pace softens slightly. No siren signals the end of the day. People simply finish what they're doing and stop. Tools are leaned carefully, fires are banked. Fields are walked one last time, checked with a kind of quiet pride. You stand still for a moment, realizing how tired you are in a deep, honest way. The kind of tired that doesn't buzz with stress, it just settles. There's satisfaction here, even without choice. You did something real, something visible. The world looks slightly different because you were part of it today. As you drift back toward the town, sore and steady, you understand how work defines everything else. Food tastes better, sleep comes easier, complaints feel smaller. Surviving a day requires effort, and effort marks you as belonging. Tomorrow, it will start again with the light. Tonight, at least, your hands can rest. As the workday eases its grip on you, something less visible but far more patient moves closer. Illness doesn't announce itself dramatically in medieval life. It lingers, it waits. It blends in so well that people stop noticing where normal discomfort ends and sickness begins. You feel this as a faint heaviness behind your eyes, a small chill that doesn't quite match the air. Probably nothing. It's always probably nothing until it isn't. Coughs echo everywhere. You heard them this morning, you heard them at the well, and now they weave through the evening like background insects. No one reacts. Coughing is as common as footsteps. Fevers come and go. Rashes appear, fade, reappear somewhere else. A mainstream historical fact settles in gently. Infectious disease is a constant part of medieval life, and people live with a wide range of chronic and acute illnesses as part of the normal human condition. You notice how people assess one another subtly. A dragged step, a flushed face, a pause to steady breath. Sympathy exists, but space exists too. There's no clear understanding of germs, but experience teaches patterns. You don't sit too close to someone who smells off. You don't share cups with a person whose cough sounds deep and wet. No one says why. They don't need to. Medical knowledge here is a layered thing. Ancient texts mingle with folk wisdom. Religion hums beneath it all. Health is about balance, hot and cold, wet and dry, based on classical ideas that still shape treatment. If you're sick, something is out of alignment. Fix the balance and the body will follow. Historians still argue whether this framework delayed more effective treatments or provided a system that at least encouraged observation and care. You pass a healer's stall where dried herbs hang in loose bundles: rosemary, sage, fennel. Someone consults quietly, describing symptoms with the careful seriousness of people who know guessing is dangerous. Remedies are prescribed with confidence: teas, poultices, rest if possible. Rest, of course, is a luxury few can afford. A quirky tidbit drifts in softly. Some medieval medical recipes call for placing a live animal, like a chicken or puppy, against the body to draw out illness. Why this is believed to work is unclear. How the animal feels about it is never recorded. You blink slowly and decide not to ask follow-up questions. Plague looms in the collective memory like a shadow that never quite lifts, even in times when it's not actively destroying populations. People speak of it quietly, referencing years rather than symptoms. During the sickness, they'll say, and everyone knows which one they mean. Though outbreaks come and go, the concept of sudden massive loss is a lived reality. Not every illness is dramatic. Many are mundane, grinding people down slowly. Joint pain, digestive trouble, eye infections from smoke and dust, skin conditions worsened by damp clothing and limited washing. You rub your arms absently, imagining how often minor irritations become constant companions. Light joke number 1 floats by slowly. Your pharmacy aisle back home just started screaming into the void. You notice how community care fills gaps where medicine can't reach. Neighbors bring food, children fetch water. Work is redistributed when someone collapses into rest they didn't plan. No one expects a cure. They aim for survival, for making the bad days softer until better ones arrive, or don't. There are hospitals, technically. Often attached to monasteries, these places offer shelter more than treatment. Clean beds, prayers, warm food. Healing of the soul is as important as the body. For many, it's the first time rest is encouraged rather than viewed as weakness. Illness doesn't pause your awareness, it sharpens it. Every ache suddenly feels suspicious. You start tracking your own breathing, listening for anything new. Is that cough just smoke or something else? Anxiety is quiet but present, a low tide always shaping the shore. As evening settles, the smells of cooking mingle with the scent of herbs burned for purification. Smoke drifts through doorways in thin ribbons. You feel tired again, but this time it's a deeper fatigue, the kind that wraps around you rather than presses down. Your body wants stillness. People speak less as night approaches. Energy is conserved. Laughter softens. Someone sneezes, and a blessing is murmured automatically, not reflex, but hope. Words carry weight when outcomes feel uncertain. Historians still argue whether medieval people felt more fear around disease than we do today, or whether familiarity dulled that edge. Standing here, you suspect it's a complicated mix. Fear exists, yes, but so does acceptance. Illness is part of life, not a personal failure. You step carefully, conserving warmth. Tomorrow is never guaranteed, but worrying doesn't keep it away. Tonight, at least, you are upright, breathing steadily, and surrounded by a community that understands sickness without dramatizing it. You move toward shelter, grateful for this small, ordinary health, and aware of how easily it could change. As evening settles fully around you, bringing quieter voices and softer light, you become aware of another presence you've been politely ignoring all day. It clings to your clothes, it lingers in your hair, it follows every movement. This is hygiene, or rather the medieval interpretation of it, and your relationship begins with reluctant acceptance. Cleanliness here is not about smelling like flowers or feeling fresh. It's about maintaining a workable level of comfort and health with limited tools and a lot of patience. A mainstream historical fact slides in calmly. Medieval people did wash their bodies and clothes, but frequency and methods varied widely depending on class, access to water, and cultural beliefs. The idea that everyone simply lived in filth is exaggerated, but let's not oversell the alternative. You follow a group toward the river again, this time at a slower pace. Evening washes are common when work is done and there's still enough light to see what you're doing. People roll up sleeves, remove shoes, and wade in with practiced ease. The water is cold, sharp enough to steal your breath gently. You dip your hands first, then your feet, then pause, weighing effort against reward. Soap exists, technically. It's made from animal fats and ash, sometimes scented with herbs if you're lucky. It cleans, though not generously. Producing lather is less important than mechanical scrubbing. Linen cloths do most of the work, rubbed firmly against skin until dirt gives up without argument. You imitate the motions, realizing quickly that this is not a spa experience. Bathing is practical and social. Conversations drift along the riverbank, meandering between gossip and silence. There's no rush, no privacy in the modern sense either. Bodies are just bodies, tools for living, not objects for idealization. Modesty exists, but it's flexible, shaped more by familiarity than rules. Despite popular belief, public bathhouses do exist in many medieval towns, especially earlier in the period. They're lively places, part hygiene center, part social club. Men and women often bathe separately, though not always. Historians still argue whether mixed bathing was as common as some sources suggest, or if moral panic has exaggerated the practice in hindsight. You imagine warm water, steam, and for a moment that sounds wonderful. Then you think about shared tubs, reused water. Who entered before you? The moment passes. Instead, you rinse your face and arms. It helps. Smoke residue lifts slightly. Sweat loosens its grip. You feel marginally more human. The ache in your muscles remains, but that's fine. Cleanliness is not expected to fix exhaustion. It just makes it easier to tolerate. A quirky tidbit floats in gently. Some medieval people believed that too much bathing could weaken the body by opening pores and letting illness in. As a result, partial washing, hands, face, feet, was favored more than full immersion. You nod slowly, willing to accept anything that requires less effort. Clothing presents a new challenge. Washing garments is labor-intensive and done carefully to preserve fabric. Linen shifts are cleaned more often than outer wool layers. Wool is brushed and aired rather than soaked because water and agitation can ruin it entirely. You watch someone beat clothing against a rock with a steady rhythm and silently apologize to your washing machine at home. Smell is relative here. Everyone carries a personal scent profile composed of smoke, sweat, animals, and environment. It's not offensive, it's just human. Strong smells only stand out when they're unusual. Illness, infection, rot. Normal body odor blends into the city's larger atmosphere. Light joke number 1 wafts by lazily. Deodorant would be treated like witchcraft and possibly burned at the stake. Possibly. You notice people rubbing herbs on their skin or tucking sprigs into clothing. Rosemary, lavender, rue. These aren't about cleanliness so much as balance. Body and spirit nudged gently toward harmony. Perfuming is subtle, practical, and slightly hopeful. As night deepens, people retreat toward homes, taking cleanliness as far as time and energy allow. No one is aiming for perfection. The goal is comfort, prevention, and maintaining dignity in a world that offers constant abrasion. Teeth are rinsed, if at all, with water or wine. Hands are wiped before eating. Faces are patted dry with cloths that smell faintly of sun and labor. Small rituals stack quietly, forming a rhythm that doesn't demand much but gives enough. Historians still argue how much hygiene practices actually impacted health outcomes, especially without germ theory. But standing here, skin cooler, mind calmer, you feel the value immediately. Clean isn't about purity, it's about relief. You settle into the evening with less grit on you than before, and that counts as success. The city dims, fires glow softer. Night insects replace daytime noise. You stretch once more, feeling less weighed down. Tomorrow will undo much of this effort. That's fine. Hygiene here isn't about permanence. It's about starting fresh enough, just enough, to keep going. And for now, that's more than enough. As the evening air cools around you, the weight of your clothes becomes more noticeable. Not heavy in an obvious way, more like a constant, gentle reminder that layers are doing a lot of quiet work. Medieval clothing isn't just about modesty or style. It's protection, insulation, social signal, and sometimes, unfortunately, a moving ecosystem. You adjust the wool tunic resting against your skin. Wool scratches at first, then becomes something you stop noticing, like gravity or the smell of smoke. A mainstream historical fact eases in here. Wool is the most common fabric in medieval Europe because it insulates even when damp, is durable, and can be produced locally. Linen sits closer to the skin when available, offering a smoother barrier between you and irritation. Clothing is built for longevity. Seams are reinforced. Garments are patched instead of replaced. Every piece represents hours of labor, from spinning thread to weaving fabric to sewing by hand. The idea of a throwaway shirt doesn't exist. You treat your clothing gently, because replacing it would mean sacrifice elsewhere. As you walk, you feel the subtle shifting of fabric against skin, and realize something else is sharing the experience: lice. They are not dramatic villains, more like quiet commuters taking advantage of the ride. Nearly everyone has them at some point. Cleanliness helps reduce numbers, but eradication is rare. This is likely the most democratic aspect of medieval life. People scratch discreetly, casually, without embarrassment. Combing is thorough and frequent. Fine-toothed lice combs exist and are used nightly in many households. You sit beside someone doing exactly this, methodically passing the comb through hair and inspecting it without judgment. A quirky tidbit floats in. Lice were so common that some medieval texts barely mention them, treating infestation as an inevitable condition rather than a problem to be solved. You suppress your reflexive horror. Context does a lot of heavy lifting here. Scratching becomes just another movement among many. If everyone has itches, no one does. Clothing color tells stories. Dyes are expensive and often regulated. Bright colors are reserved for those who can afford them or are permitted to wear them. Earth tones dominate your view. Browns, grays, muted greens, faded slightly by sun and washing. You notice how naturally the palette blends with the landscape, as if everyone is trying not to stand out too brightly. Laundering happens when it can. Linen layers are washed more often. Wool is aired, brushed, beaten. Hanging garments outside helps sun and wind do quiet work. In winter, laundry becomes a strategic operation. Too much water risks frozen fabric and cracked fibers. Cleanliness adapts to season rather than insisting on routine. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced worse infestations of parasites than later periods, or if improved clothing density simply made lice more noticeable. Watching everyone manage it with practiced calm, you suspect people just adjusted expectations in ways modern minds resist. Footwear demands attention too. Shoes are leather, thin-soled, stitched by hand. They soften with wear but offer minimal cushioning. Walking feels different, ground texture transmitting directly up through your legs. Your feet work harder to maintain balance on uneven streets. You lift one foot and inspect the sole absently, discovering a patch sewn lovingly over a long-forgotten hole. Light joke number 1 wanders in slowly. Your running shoes just left the chat. Hats and head coverings appear everywhere. Caps, coifs, hoods. Keeping the head covered is practical for warmth and cleanliness. Hair attracts dirt, lice, and attention. Covering it solves several problems at once. Removing a head covering is intimate, familiar, or formal, depending on the context. You leave yours right where it is. As darkness settles, people ready clothes for sleep. Outer layers hung carefully, inner layers loosened but not abandoned. Fabric is too valuable to sprawl carelessly. Everyone has fewer garments than you'd expect, rotated and repaired endlessly. Ownership is measured and appreciated. You notice how clothing shapes posture and movement. Long tunics restrict stride. Belts adjust weight distribution. Garments teach you how to move within them. They guide behavior as much as social rules. You sit, finally still, and allow the day to settle in your clothes. Smells linger, but mixed with warmth and familiarity. It's not unpleasant, just lived in. Comfort redefines itself quietly. Cloth rustles softly. Someone nearby yawns. Conversation thins to murmurs. The itch on your arm comes and goes. You scratch gently, without urgency. This too is normal now. In medieval times, comfort isn't about perfection, it's about adaptation. You've adapted more than you expected today. Wrapped in wool and shared experience, you let the world slow, feeling the steady reassurance of layers doing their quiet work. Night pulls itself fully over the town, and with it comes the promise of shelter. You follow a familiar doorway into a house that looks like many others. Timber frame, wattle and daub walls, and a roof that breathes faintly with the night wind. From the outside, it seems sturdy enough. From the inside, you quickly learn that comfort here is a creative negotiation. The door closes behind you with a soft thud, and the first thing you feel is the temperature drop. Indoor life isn't necessarily warmer, it's just less windy. A mainstream historical fact settles in calmly. Most medieval homes, especially for common people, consist of a single main room where cooking, working, and sleeping all happen together. Separate rooms are a luxury reserved for the wealthy. The hearth sits at the center or along one wall, embers glowing steadily. There's no chimney as you know it, just a smoke hole in the roof that may or may not cooperate. Smoke drifts upward, then sideways, then politely ignores gravity altogether. Your eyes water slightly, then adjust. Everyone else already has. Living with smoke is part of life, an invisible roommate that never moves out. Benches line the walls. A trestle table rests folded, ready for tomorrow. Tools lean casually in corners. Chickens huddle nearby, settling into sleep with murmurs and soft shuffles. Animals indoors feel strange until you remember they add warmth and security. They are both roommates and resources, and their presence is entirely practical. You sit near the hearth, palms open to the heat. Fire management is a skill all its own. Let it die, and the cold bites hard by morning. Feed it too much, and smoke thickens unpleasantly. Fuel is precious. Wood, peat, whatever the land offers. Every log is considered. Walls breathe in this space. Gaps in the structure allow drafts to wander freely. Somewhere overhead, thatch absorbs night moisture with a gentle sigh. You wrap your wool tighter and notice how much you rely on layers now. Clothing becomes a portable blanket, insulation you never quite remove. A quirky tidbit drifts in gently. Some medieval homes feature a smoke shelf, a ledge where hams or fish are hung to cure above the hearth, benefiting from warmth and smoke simultaneously. You glance upward and spot dark shapes swaying slightly. It smells assertive. Survival often smells that way. Bedding is prepared without ceremony. Straw mattresses are shaken and fluffed, not for softness, but to redistribute pressure and discourage pests. Fresh straw is a gift when available. Blankets are layered carefully. Sheets exist, sometimes, but they're optional rather than expected. You stretch out cautiously, testing where your bones meet reality. It's hard. You adjust. It remains hard. Light joke number 1 floats by slowly. Your memory foam mattress will be hearing from your spine tomorrow. Sleep is communal. Privacy is minimal. People share space, warmth, breathing rhythms. Children curl in close. Elders rest near the fire. Everyone knows everyone else's sleep habits. Snoring isn't commented on. Night noises blend into the background. The crackle of embers, distant animals, the wind probing weak spots in the walls. Cold sneaks in anyway. Even with fire, the warmth fades as embers dim. You feel it along your legs first, then in your fingers. Shifting closer helps. Eventually, stillness creates its own fragile cocoon. You learn not to move unless necessary. Historians still argue how well medieval houses protected inhabitants from harsh winters, especially in northern regions. Evidence suggests many endured significant cold indoors, relying on clothing and shared heat rather than architecture. Tonight, you believe it. Sleep comes in layers too. Not one long, uninterrupted stretch, but shifting phases. You drift, wake briefly, drift again. This segmented sleep pattern is common, though no one names it as such. Waking in the night isn't alarming, it's expected. A chance to tend the fire, whisper a prayer, or simply listen to the quiet. You wake once to the sound of rain on thatch, rhythmic and soothing. A drip lands somewhere you hope isn't important. Tomorrow's concern. Everything is tomorrow's concern until it arrives. The house inhales and exhales around you. Wood creaks, an animal shifts. Someone coughs softly. Despite everything, there is a sense of safety here. The walls are thin, the comforts few, but you are sheltered from the dark beyond. As your body relaxes fully for the first time today, you realize how much effort simply existing has taken. Rest isn't indulgent, it's necessary maintenance. Sleep here isn't luxurious, but it's real. Wrapped in wool, breathing smoke-softened air, you drift deeper. The hearth dims, the city beyond quiets. For now, you are held by shelter. Not perfect, not gentle, but enough. You trudge along the uneven cobblestones, the occasional clop of a distant horse's hooves echoing off low timber-framed buildings. The morning fog still clings to the roadside, moist and heavy, carrying that unmistakable mixture of smoke, manure, and damp straw. Your feet squelch in mud patches where the rain hasn't fully drained, and you begin to realize that medieval travel is nothing like the smooth highway you take today. Every step feels deliberate, cautious, because the roads are more a suggestion than a reliable path. Potholes could hide twisted roots, abandoned wheel ruts, or worse, a sudden ankle-swallowing puddle. You probably wouldn't last a day walking these routes without a strong sense of balance and a keen eye on where you plant your feet. The people you pass are a motley crew of merchants, pilgrims, and peasants, all with their own reasons for being out at this hour. Merchants balance baskets of vegetables and jars of honey, occasionally tipping a nod or muttered greeting as they squeeze past. Pilgrims, recognizable by the worn badges or simple crosses hanging from their necks, shuffle with heavy boots and sunken shoulders. And the peasants, oh, the peasants, carry tools, sacks, or livestock, their movements efficient, as if every second not spent working is wasted. You notice their hands are rough, their clothing patched more than whole, and they seem to navigate this messy, unpredictable terrain with an ease you simply do not possess. If you tried to march along with them, you'd be wobbling in confusion, probably stepping into manure or tripping over stray stones. Roadside inns offer fleeting comfort, though you hesitate at the smell wafting out the open doors, a mix of burning wood, cooking meat, and unwashed bodies. Rest is possible, but food and water are often suspicious, and your stomach reminds you that your modern standards won't apply. Speaking of food, imagine trying to eat your dinner on the side of the road. Crusty bread, salted meat, and the occasional fruit are all you'll find, and even those items might have been carried through weeks of travel. Preservation methods are rudimentary, which brings a whole new level of caution to consuming anything. Historians still argue whether traveling merchants relied more on salted goods or hard biscuits to survive the road, and either way, you'd quickly learn that your soft, fluffy modern bread is an impossibility here. You glance at the landscape and notice that roads aren't just narrow, they're often hazardous. One minute you're squeezing past a cart, the next a sudden dip could jolt you into a ditch. Bridges, when they exist, are rickety affairs of timber planks and ropes, swaying slightly under the weight of even a single cart. You try not to look down into the murky water below, though your curiosity tempts you. Crossing such bridges requires a blend of nerve and a good sense of timing, something you'd have to develop quickly if you wanted to survive a longer journey. Animals are both companions and threats. Dogs roam freely, sometimes friendly, sometimes snapping at stray livestock. Horses, larger and more unpredictable, kick without warning. And let's not forget the occasional goat or cow that has wandered onto the road, forcing an awkward sidestep that could send you into mud or worse. Then there are the smaller, less obvious hazards. Rats scurrying across the path, snakes sunning themselves in the few open patches, and insects that bite or sting without remorse. You swat and move, realizing that every creature has a claim to the road, and you, human or not, are simply tolerated. The weather plays a role too. Rain is miserable, snow can be treacherous, and even a strong wind can make balance precarious, especially on the raised wooden walkways some towns cobbled together to avoid perpetual mud. You notice a small group of travelers huddled beneath a makeshift lean-to, trying to keep dry while their shoes sink into mud. You try to imagine spending hours walking like this, day after day, and it's clear you'd be whining within an hour, if not crying outright. Yet these people persist, driven by work, faith, or sheer necessity. Travel isn't only physically challenging, it's socially complex. You meet local customs as you go. Tolls, fees for bridge crossings, and sometimes the expectation to offer hospitality if someone happens to knock on your shoulder. If you aren't prepared, misunderstandings can cost both coin and dignity. You notice an argument brewing between a merchant and a toll keeper over a few pennies, and it's a reminder that patience, negotiation skills, and an understanding of local law could literally make or break your journey. At nightfall, the road transforms again. Darkness brings a different kind of hazard. Travelers rely on the moon, stars, and flickering lanterns. The shadows of trees, abandoned carts, and fence posts stretch long and strange, and every rustle could be an animal or something more sinister. Wolves, bandits, and opportunistic thieves are real threats, though historians still argue whether wild animals or human marauders pose the greater danger on typical trade routes. You hug your cloak tighter, adjusting your pace to keep your nerves steady, realizing that your modern sense of security is almost laughably naive. You also begin to notice the absurdly mundane challenges: wet boots that never dry, clothing that chafes after hours of walking, and aching muscles that have no modern comforts like cushioned insoles or supportive fabrics. Every step is a negotiation between your body, the environment, and your sense of self-preservation. You realize quickly that you wouldn't last long without adapting, improvising, and developing a stubborn tolerance for discomfort. The road itself is a teacher, harsh and uncompromising, yet it doesn't scold. It merely continues to challenge every misstep you make. Finally, when you pause at a small crossroads, you see a tiny signpost marking the next village, a distant promise of warmth, food, and human company. But even this relief is tempered by uncertainty. How far, what dangers, and what you must leave behind to get there. You reflect, softly, that modern travel is an indulgence of ease, speed, and predictability. Here, every mile demands awareness, patience, and a willingness to accept that small miscalculations can carry consequences. As your eyes scan the horizon, you imagine yourself trudging through this medieval world for hours, days even, and the truth becomes clear. you'd likely survive only a short time before exhaustion, hunger, or a careless step reminded you that this life isn't just hard, it's relentless. Yet there's a rhythm to it, a slow, deliberate pace that in its own way is mesmerizing. You realize that in small doses, you can almost appreciate it. The quiet, the fog, the earthy smell of the road, and the odd camaraderie among travelers, sharing a brief path. Just don't plan on making it a lifestyle, because frankly, you wouldn't last a day. You wander into the village square, where the rhythm of daily life subtly shifts into something a little more tense, a little more performative. The clatter of carts and chatter of villagers continues, but now there's a new undertone: law in action. Crime in the medieval world isn't hidden behind polished police stations or blinking lights. It's visible, public, and sometimes strangely theatrical. You probably wouldn't last a day navigating these streets without learning quickly how the local rules work, because even minor missteps can draw unwanted attention, or worse, punishment. A petty thief, small and wiry, ducks between barrels and carts, trying to make off with a loaf of bread. You watch as a town watchman spots him, giving chase in worn boots that flap like sails. The capture is immediate, the crowd's murmur swelling with curiosity. Justice here has a rhythm that's part spectacle, part cautionary tale. Minor theft might result in a public beating, a fine, or being placed in the stocks. An upright wooden frame where you sit in discomfort while passers-by throw rotten vegetables or heckle from the sidelines. You imagine sitting there, legs sore and pride bruised, realizing you're completely at the mercy of the community's whims. Historians still argue whether stocks were more effective as punishment or as social entertainment, and the answer might not change the fact that your modern sense of privacy would be obliterated. Serious crimes, assault, arson, or worse, are even more public. You notice a small scaffold in the distance, ropes coiled, and the air around it carries a strange combination of dread and fascination. Punishments vary by region, status, and whim of the local lord or magistrate, and you can almost hear the whispered debates about fairness or cruelty. One particularly curious penalty is the ducking stool, used to punish gossipers or minor offenders, especially women accused of quarrelsomeness. The idea is to strap someone into a chair and lower them repeatedly into the water, their shouts echoing across the square. You shiver at the thought, thinking that even a single day near such public performances would test your modern nerves. Crime isn't limited to the obvious. Frauds, cheating at market, or skipping a toll can bring you into conflict with authority. The village tax collector is a familiar, dreaded figure. His sharp eyes and ledger ensure that no coin goes unaccounted for. You notice a small argument at a stall where a merchant claims his scales were misread. The dispute escalates quickly, drawing attention from neighbors who gather to witness the unfolding drama. Even if you are completely innocent, simply being present in such a tense environment makes you acutely aware that survival requires observation, tact, and sometimes strategic invisibility. You notice that some punishments have an element of local flavor or outright absurdity. In one village, you glimpse a man forced to parade through the streets wearing a sign that announces his offense, essentially becoming a living billboard of shame. Nearby, a pair of children laugh nervously at a similar spectacle, suggesting that public embarrassment served both corrective and entertainment purposes. You can almost feel yourself instinctively shrinking from the gaze of the community, understanding that social norms in medieval times were enforced through visibility as much as through pain or fines. Law enforcement itself is inconsistent. Village constables, appointed by lords, have varying degrees of competence and authority. Some are diligent, walking their beats with keen eyes, while others are more interested in small bribes or idle chatter. You realize that traveling or simply living in this environment requires not only obedience to the law, but a careful reading of the personalities enforcing it. Misjudging a constable's mood could land you in trouble even if your intentions are pure. Interestingly, the line between justice and ritual can blur. Public punishment often doubles as moral instruction. For example, tithing or minor thefts might culminate in a sermon or public admonishment, where the offender is forced to recite penance aloud. There's a certain rhythm to this, almost like a communal lesson in morality. You might catch yourself thinking, well, at least there's a lesson here, before remembering that sitting through hours of this as the lesson's subject would quickly sap your will to live comfortably. Crime also interacts with social hierarchy. A wealthy merchant might pay a fine, or the daughter of a noble could escape public scrutiny entirely. Common folk, on the other hand, often face both the legal and social consequences fully. You imagine yourself, a complete outsider, attempting to navigate these dynamics without drawing attention. It's nearly impossible. Even a simple misunderstanding, like mispronouncing a local name or accidentally stepping into someone else's market stall, could escalate if observed by the wrong eyes. There are also bizarre punishments designed for spectacle or moral reinforcement. One curious practice is the cucking stool, similar to the ducking stool, where offenders, often women accused of scolding or domestic disputes, are publicly embarrassed. Scholars still debate how widespread such punishments truly were, but their presence in historical records reminds you that medieval justice often had a performative aspect, intended to make both the offender and the audience feel the weight of wrongdoing. You imagine the tension, the squirming, the awkward attempts to appear composed while everyone else stares and shiver. Petty crime, surprisingly, can be as dangerous as serious offenses. A scuffle over a stolen chicken could spiral into multiple injuries, because weapons, even simple sticks or knives, are commonly carried. You notice a small argument over a dropped basket escalate quickly, and you step back, glad to be an observer rather than a participant. Modern sensibilities might find this chaotic or exaggerated, but for medieval villagers, these incidents are both routine and real. Finally, there's an unexpected rhythm to witnessing law in action. Though unsettling, it offers insight into medieval life, the stakes, the public accountability, and the curious ways communities balanced punishment with entertainment. You realize that surviving here requires not just understanding what's legal, but reading the room, observing local habits, and moving carefully between the boundaries of acceptability. One false move, and you could find yourself a spectacle, a lesson, or worse, depending on circumstance and the mood of the crowd. By the time you leave the square, the rhythm of life has shifted back into its quieter pace. The clang of the blacksmith, the lowing of cows, and the gentle chatter of neighbors resume. Yet a subtle tension lingers, a reminder that medieval law was never far from the surface. You reflect that, while the days were long and laborious, the public and often theatrical nature of justice was an unavoidable backdrop. You'd need nerves of steel, quick thinking, and a respect for local authority just to make it through one day unscathed. And even then, luck would play a role. The village square fades behind you, replaced by winding alleys and the soft shuffle of returning villagers. You think back to the thief, the stocks, the ducking stool, and the minor arguments over coins. It's a vivid lesson. Here, every step, every glance, and every word can have consequences. You understand, perhaps more clearly than ever, that your modern sense of security and privacy is useless. In this world, survival requires a combination of careful observation, strategic invisibility, and a healthy respect for the unpredictability of both human and social nature. And still, despite all this, you can't help but notice a strange rhythm, a pulse to village life that's almost hypnotic. Even public punishment becomes part of the background, a reminder that this world is demanding, yes, but also alive with patterns, lessons, and stories unfolding minute by minute. You trudge on, muscles tired but mind alert, realizing once again that you would not last a day without learning, adapting, and accepting the strange, vivid tapestry that is medieval law. You wander past the square and notice smaller, quieter pockets of life tucked between the buildings, places where children dart between barrels and carts, laughing in a way that feels both timeless and startling. Their voices carry over the uneven cobblestones, a gentle reminder that even in a world of labor, laws, and looming danger, life finds a way to be playful. You probably wouldn't last a day trying to keep pace with these children. Their energy is relentless, their agility born of necessity as well as habit. Medieval childhood is nothing like the long, cushioned youth you might know. Work begins early, sometimes as soon as a child can walk steadily, and play is squeezed into the spaces between chores, errands, and lessons in survival. You watch a small boy carry a basket of kindling, wobbling under its weight, while a girl balances a tiny wooden doll, its features crudely carved yet carefully painted. Even toys are practical. Small wooden swords for boys to mimic labor or battle, rag dolls for girls to learn care and domesticity. Historians still argue whether play was primarily educational or simply a necessary outlet for excess energy, and from where you stand, it seems like a mix of both, with the balance shifting depending on the household and the child's station. You notice the texture of the toys, the splintery wood, the uneven stitching of cloth dolls, and the carefully carved miniature animals. These objects, though modest by modern standards, carry immense imaginative weight. You can almost hear the tiny footsteps racing around a makeshift battlefield of barrels and overturned crates. One child jabs a stick into the mud, pretending it's a sword, while another waves a rag doll as if leading an army. The play is chaotic, fluid, and incredibly creative. You think about how quickly modern toys have sanitized the experience, removing the tactile challenge that shapes both imagination and coordination. Education is sporadic and uneven, often depending on social class and gender. Boys in towns might learn reading, writing, or arithmetic if they have access to a school or a cleric willing to teach. Most girls, however, focus on domestic skills, sewing, cooking, and tending to younger siblings or livestock. You observe a young girl tracing letters in the dirt with a stick, while her brother counts coins beside her, a crude form of accounting practice. Even informal lessons like this carry a weight of expectation. Mistakes aren't simply forgiven. They can affect your future prospects, marriageability, or ability to manage a household. You imagine trying to absorb these lessons while also keeping up with chores and play, and it's clear that modern childhood luxuries, long summers, vacations, and free afternoons would be utterly foreign here. Children also develop physical resilience quickly. Your eyes follow a small group attempting to climb a low wooden fence. Their scraped knees and bent fingers suggest repeated failures that never seem to dampen enthusiasm. Even play has a component of skill building, balance, strength, awareness of hazards, and negotiation with peers. You would probably be exhausted just watching, let alone attempting the same feats without modern footwear, supportive clothing, or adult supervision. Yet the children move with an innate confidence born of necessity. They have to navigate the world early because the adults around them rely on their small hands and sharp minds. Meals, too, shape childhood. You see children sharing scraps of bread, cheese, or occasionally fruit, learning quickly that rationing and resourcefulness are not optional. One boy gnaws on a crust, eyeing the roasted meat hanging nearby, while his friend carefully hides a piece of stale biscuit for later. The lessons are subtle but important, understanding scarcity, anticipating needs, and sometimes negotiating with siblings or peers for small privileges. You think about modern snacks and convenience foods, and it's almost humorous to imagine yourself trying to trade a packaged cookie in exchange for a dry biscuit, only to realize the social economy here is entirely different. Rites of passage mark another aspect of childhood, often abrupt and serious. A young apprentice might officially begin work in a guild, learning trades from scratch under the watchful eye of a master. Initiations can include physical tests, long days of labor, or small ceremonial challenges that would test patience and endurance. You notice a small group of boys attempting to lift a heavy beam under supervision, and you realize that even minor failures are noted, critiqued, and remembered, a stark contrast to modern, cushioned schooling where mistakes are often encouraged as part of learning. Despite all this, laughter and creativity flourish. You watch a girl swing a bucket as a makeshift horse, her imagination transforming a utilitarian object into something magical. Nearby, two boys are balancing on a low wall, racing to see who can stay upright longest. The air is alive with movement, and the sounds of play mix with the creak of carts and the clatter of market activity. You realize that, in small ways, these children are learning crucial survival skills: agility, awareness, cooperation, and risk management, all under the guise of play. You also notice the small but vivid quirks of daily life. A child attempting to catch a chicken that clearly has other plans. A boy fashioning a slingshot from a tree branch. A girl quietly observing an ant colony near a pile of discarded straw. Each small action teaches observation, strategy, and patience. You think about how modern structured play rarely incorporates these elements organically, and it strikes you that medieval childhood, while harsh, offers a kind of resilience training that would be impossible to replicate in today's world. Still, danger is never far away. A child chasing a ball or a stick can stumble into a pile of sharp tools, step on broken pottery, or encounter a wandering animal. Every moment of play requires both imagination and vigilance. You probably wouldn't survive a single afternoon trying to emulate them, as your reflexes, expectations, and caution are calibrated for a more predictable environment. Yet you admire the rhythm. Each risk is measured, each failure teaches a lesson, and each success builds confidence. As the sun dips lower, you notice the children winding down. Small hands tuck dolls under arms, sticks are dropped, and laughter softens into quiet chatter. Parents call them home, and chores resume, feeding chickens, collecting firewood, or helping prepare the evening meal. The transition from play to responsibility is seamless, almost invisible, but utterly essential. You understand that these children are being shaped for survival, endurance, and community participation. By the time evening settles, the village seems to exhale. The children retreat indoors or to safer corners, their energy spent but their skills honed. You reflect on what you've observed, that medieval childhood is a constant negotiation between play, work, learning, and survival. Every moment is layered, every action purposeful, and every small challenge carries meaning. You realize that, as an outsider, you'd struggle to keep up, not because the tasks are impossible, but because your expectations, comfort levels, and attention spans are calibrated for a life of modern ease. Still, there's a rhythm here, a balance between toil and joy, discipline and freedom, danger and delight. The children, unwittingly, teach you that even in a world that's harsh and demanding, moments of imagination, laughter, and connection persist. You probably wouldn't last a day living as they do, but watching them, you gain a deeper appreciation for the resilience, ingenuity, and adaptability that the medieval world instilled from its earliest age. As evening deepens, you drift toward the small chapel at the village center, the faint glow of candles spilling from narrow windows onto the cobblestones. The air is cool and carries a faint mix of incense, smoke from nearby hearths, and the lingering aroma of damp stone. Religion, in the medieval world, isn't just a set of abstract ideas. It's woven into the rhythm of daily life, offering comfort, structure, and a framework for understanding the unpredictable world around you. You probably wouldn't last a day ignoring its influence, because faith and ritual guide almost every action, from waking to work to sleep. Villagers move quietly, some crossing themselves as they pass the chapel, others murmuring prayers under their breath. You notice the simple act of lighting a candle at a shrine, the flickering flame reflected in the dark wooden walls. It's both meditative and practical. Light, after all, is scarce after sunset, and the candle's glow can help ward off both darkness and the anxiety that comes with uncertainty. Historians still argue about how genuinely internalized versus performative such acts were, but from your perspective, the rituals are unmistakably central to community life. Even if you personally don't believe, participating, or at least appearing to, can be critical for social survival. You wander closer to observe a small devotional ceremony. The priest, clad in simple robes, recites prayers in a slow, deliberate cadence, each word seeming to hang in the cool night air. Villagers respond with murmured amens, rhythmic gestures, and the occasional bowed head. You notice a child tracing shapes in the dust with a finger, mimicking the movements of adults, absorbing lessons both sacred and social. You probably wouldn't last a day if you tried to step outside the expected behavior here. Even small infractions can draw gentle scolding or wary glances, signaling the importance of conformity in this tightly knit, faith-driven society. Ritual extends beyond formal worship. Morning and evening prayers, blessings over meals, and small charms tucked into pockets or homes all reinforce a sense of order. You notice a family quietly reciting a table grace, their hands pressed together, eyes closed. The words are simple, almost whispered, but the act carries a weight of communal and personal reassurance. It reminds you that medieval life is unpredictable, that plagues, hunger, and sudden accidents are constant threats, and that ritual offers a comforting illusion of control. You imagine trying to replicate that sense of assurance without participating fully. It seems almost impossible. The architecture of the chapel itself contributes to the mood. Wooden beams creak softly under the weight of the roof. Candles illuminate carved stone, and the faint echo of footsteps creates a sense of resonance that seems to slow time. You notice a carved gargoyle peeking from a corner, a strange combination of artistry and superstition meant to ward off evil spirits. Fringe practices like these remind you that medieval faith often blends the mystical with the practical. You might smirk at the idea of tiny stone guardians, but the villagers approach them with a mix of reverence and habitual acceptance, a subtle reminder that you're very much an outsider. Communal rituals also reinforce social bonds. Festivals, processions, and seasonal observances are opportunities for both celebration and instruction. You notice a small procession winding through the village streets, simple banners held aloft by children and adults alike. Music is improvised, flutes, drums, and the occasional wooden whistle, and the participants chant or sing in rhythm. You feel the subtle pull of participation, the way collective action creates a sense of belonging and shared purpose. Even watching, you begin to understand that survival here isn't just physical, it's social, emotional, and spiritual. Your modern notions of individualism would be a liability in this environment. Religious practice also includes private rituals, some of them peculiar by modern standards. You notice a villager dipping a piece of bread in holy water before a meal, another wearing a tiny amulet around the wrist. Scholars still debate the prevalence and meaning of such customs, but you notice their effect: reassurance, a sense of protection, and a slow, deliberate rhythm to daily life. You imagine yourself fumbling through such acts, unsure of their meaning or method, and it's clear that surviving, even socially, requires observation, adaptation, and a willingness to engage in unfamiliar, sometimes uncomfortable practices. Pilgrimages, though less common for villagers than for the devout or wealthy, illustrate the extremes of faith. You catch sight of a small group setting off, staffs in hand, hoods drawn, with provisions strapped to their backs. The journey promises spiritual reward, but also exposes them to the dangers of roads, weather, and physical exhaustion. You probably wouldn't last a day walking alongside them, carrying your own meager supplies, navigating treacherous paths, and maintaining the ritual cadence required for prayers along the way. Yet the rhythm, the shared purpose, and the blending of endurance with devotion is striking. Even minor superstitions permeate life. People might place charms over doorways, sprinkle salt to ward off misfortune, or perform small gestures before handling sharp tools. While these acts seem whimsical to you, they reflect an underlying worldview in which unseen forces influence every outcome. Participation, or at least polite acknowledgement, is essential. Ignoring them could mark you as careless or disrespectful, drawing social disapproval or subtle exclusion. You realize that faith in medieval times isn't a sidebar, it's an invisible framework holding daily life together. You notice the interplay of light, sound, and ritual, A bell tolls somewhere in the distance, signaling the hour, the beginning of evening prayers, or simply marking time. The sound carries over the village, calling people together, slowing their pace, and providing a quiet rhythm to the otherwise chaotic day. You probably wouldn't last a day resisting the pull of this rhythm, nor would you likely appreciate how deeply it structures even small choices: when to eat, when to work, when to rest. Even your own breathing slows slightly as you move with the cadence of the village, blending observation with a subtle participation. Finally, you witness a brief, odd devotional practice. A villager traces the sign of the cross over each doorway in a narrow alley, whispering a phrase you can't quite hear. It's a gesture meant to ward off illness, misfortune, or evil spirits. Scholars still argue whether such practices were primarily symbolic or sincerely believed to have protective power. But for you, it's another reminder of how intertwined faith, daily life, and survival are in this world. You realize that even if you personally don't share these beliefs, understanding and acknowledging them would be crucial to lasting a day or longer here. As darkness settles fully, you feel the village exhale. Candles flicker, the chapel doors close, and the murmurs of prayers become a gentle undercurrent. You reflect on the day's rhythm: work, play, law, travel, and now faith. Each element reinforces the others, weaving a subtle, persistent pattern that guides the villagers' movements, choices, and understanding of the world. You probably wouldn't last a day ignoring any one of these threads, but watching them, you begin to see the quiet order that allows life to persist in a world that, on the surface, seems harsh and unpredictable. You step back, taking a final look at the chapel and the soft light spilling into the street. The rituals, prayers, and superstitions are strange, perhaps whimsical, certainly foreign, but they are essential. They remind you that survival in medieval times isn't just about muscle, endurance, or cunning. It's about rhythm, awareness, and respect for the invisible forces shaping every action. You realize that, in this world, religion isn't a choice. It's part of the fabric that makes life intelligible, manageable, and, somehow, comforting. As you step back into the soft light of the village streets, your eyes are drawn to the subtle, constant presence of animals. They are everywhere, clucking, bleating, neighing, and skittering, adding a layer of texture and unpredictability to daily life. You probably wouldn't last a day here without learning how to coexist with them, because animals are both companions and hazards in the medieval world, shaping your routines, risks, and even your hygiene. Domestic animals are the most obvious. Chickens peck near doorways, their sharp beaks scattering straw and food scraps. You notice pigs rooting through the mud, small and surprisingly quick despite their bulk, and goats nimbly balancing on uneven ground, always on the lookout for something edible. Cows plod along the road, their hooves clattering against stone, forcing you to step aside or risk a squish or a foul stench. Even dogs, often free-roaming, weave between your legs, some friendly, some suspicious. You quickly realize that every step must be deliberate. A misstep could result in an accident, a chase, or a surprise encounter with manure. Animals aren't only practical, they're embedded in economy and daily survival. Chickens provide eggs, pigs offer meat, and cows supply milk and leather. Horses and donkeys are critical for transport, pulling carts, and carrying burdens. You notice a small stable where a few horses shift impatiently, flaring their nostrils at passers-by. Their strength and unpredictability are both helpful and intimidating. A startled animal can easily injure someone unprepared. Historians still argue about the exact ratio of working animals to humans in smaller villages, but what's clear is that your survival depends on reading their behaviors and respecting their routines. Smaller, less welcome animals are a constant presence too. Rats and mice skitter across the market, drawn to spilled grain and scraps. Fleas, lice, and other pests accompany humans and animals alike, persistent and insidious. You itch just imagining a single night spent crawling with them, and it becomes obvious why medieval people often used herbs, smoke, or rudimentary chemicals to protect themselves. Fringe remedies like sprinkling crushed insects on floors or using strange concoctions to repel vermin seem bizarre, yet they reflect a constant negotiation between humans and the smaller creatures sharing their space. Animals also shape the environment in more subtle ways. Their dung fertilizes fields, feeds fires, and sometimes even doubles as construction material for wattle and daub walls. You pause to watch a group of children stepping carefully around a fresh pile of cow dung, trying not to ruin their shoes. There's an odd rhythm to it: life, sustenance, and hazard coexisting in close quarters. You probably wouldn't last a day without developing both an eye for danger and a tolerance for these unavoidable, sometimes pungent realities. Pets, though rarer than today, offer companionship. Small dogs or cats are common, often valued for pest control as much as affection. You notice a thin cat weaving around the legs of villagers, flicking its tail in irritation at a passing chicken. The cat's movements are precise, aware, and deliberate, qualities you would need to adopt if you hope to survive in a world full of unpredictable creatures. Some animals carry ritual or symbolic significance. You spot a small shrine with a carved bird motif, suggesting protection or luck. And nearby, a farmer sprinkles feed in a circle, a gesture meant to ensure a good harvest. Scholars still debate how much such practices influenced actual outcomes versus serving as psychological reassurance. But either way, ignoring them could mark you as disrespectful or naive. You would quickly learn that animals aren't just practical. They're woven into belief systems, superstitions, and daily customs. Hazards, too, are constant. Horses may kick, goats can headbutt, and even dogs can bite if startled. You navigate carefully, noticing villagers skilled at predicting animal behavior, the way a chicken shifts, the twitch of a cow's ear, the low growl of a dog. You probably wouldn't last a day without such awareness. Modern instincts alone won't suffice. Each animal encounter requires observation, timing, and respect. Traveling animals introduce another layer of complexity. Merchants' horses, donkeys laden with goods, or wandering cattle can suddenly intersect your path. You imagine yourself attempting to navigate a narrow alley while a fully grown pig barrels past, and it becomes clear that patience and agility are essential survival skills. Every step requires scanning your environment, predicting movements, and adjusting in real time. Mental and physical dexterity that modern convenience rarely demands. Despite all the hazards, animals also provide rhythm, comfort, and life. You notice the soft clucking of chickens in the dusk, the lowing of cows returning to their stalls, and the occasional neigh of a horse settling in for the night. These sounds, though mundane, are deeply tied to the village's routines. You begin to understand that survival here is not just about humans, it's about maintaining balance with all living creatures sharing the space. And finally, there are the quirks. You spot a goose strutting purposefully along the main path, wings slightly raised, clearly believing itself more important than all nearby humans. Children laugh nervously, villagers step aside, and the goose continues undeterred. Scholars still debate how seriously such animals were regarded in local superstition versus simple annoyance, but you recognize the lesson. Coexistence requires patience, observation, and an acceptance that not everything will obey human will. As night approaches, animals settle into their routines, some in stalls, others finding warm corners near hearths or barns. The village itself seems to breathe along with them, a gentle cadence of movement, sound, and life. You reflect on the day, realizing that surviving even a short time here means learning to read the behaviors of creatures large and small, respecting their rhythms, and tolerating their inconveniences. You probably wouldn't last a day without this knowledge. Yet in observing, you glimpse the quiet harmony that allows life to persist in a world both demanding and alive with creatures sharing every step of the way. The sun has dipped below the horizon, and shadows stretch long across the uneven cobblestones. The village exhales a softer rhythm, a quiet settling of activity as doors close and fires flicker behind small windows. Nightfall in the medieval world is not like the gentle dimming you're used to. Darkness is physical, a living presence that carries both calm and subtle threats. You probably wouldn't last a day here without learning to navigate not just the environment, but the unfamiliar patterns of sound, movement, and instinct that emerge as the world slows and night creatures awaken. The first thing you notice is the change in sound. The raucous chatter of villagers fades into occasional footsteps, a dog barking in the distance, or the soft lowing of a cow settling in its stall. Your ears, attuned to modern hums, engines, and ambient noise, suddenly catch everything. The creak of a wooden shutter swaying in the wind, the drip of water from a leaky roof, the distant howl of a fox or wolf along the outskirts. Even ordinary sounds take on a slightly eerie quality in low light, requiring vigilance that is mentally exhausting without respite. Inside the homes, night is a practical affair. Fires burn low, smoke curling through chimneys that carry both warmth and the bitter scent of soot. You see families huddled together under thin blankets, sometimes sharing a small bowl of gruel or reheated leftovers. The medieval concept of comfort is humble. Warmth comes from proximity, layered clothing, and careful arrangement of straw or rush mats. You probably wouldn't last a day trying to sleep in these conditions because even minor discomfort, drafts, cold floors, or the constant presence of insects can keep you alert, tugging at your sleep instinct. Yet there is a rhythm here. The quiet management of warmth, food, and safety, almost meditative in its routine. Outside, the streets take on a new character. Torches flicker in holders, casting long, uncertain shadows. Alleyways narrow into darkness, and the uneven stones seem more treacherous than in daylight. Traveling at night was rare and often discouraged because both human and animal hazards increased. You imagine slipping on the wet cobblestones, misjudging a horse's position, or wandering too close to a livestock pen and startling the animals. Scholars still debate how dangerous night travel really was versus simply being uncomfortable or inconvenient. But your instincts tell you that caution is essential. Noise carries differently at night too. The squawk of a goose, the clatter of a dropped bucket, or even a whispered conversation seems magnified, echoing across the empty square. You probably wouldn't last a day ignoring these subtle cues, because survival depends on interpreting sound accurately, recognizing threats, noting unusual activity, and moving without drawing unwanted attention. Even the wind becomes a player, rattling shutters and rustling leaves, keeping your senses alert. Within the homes, small creatures continue their nightly routines. Rats scuttle along beams and walls, mice explore for crumbs, and insects settle among straw and wood. You shift uneasily, realizing that even in bed, you share space with creatures you might otherwise dismiss or avoid. Domestic animals, too, settle near hearths or in corners, offering warmth and companionship, but also requiring vigilance. A horse's low neigh, a dog's shuffle, or a cat's scratch can disturb sleep, and you probably wouldn't last a day without cultivating tolerance for these minor disturbances. The rhythm of personal routine is subtle but deliberate. Villagers perform last-minute prayers, secure doors, and check animals. Lamps and candles are trimmed or extinguished, blankets arranged, and the household prepares for hours of darkness with minimal light. Even small acts, like setting a bucket near the door for convenience or stacking firewood for morning warmth, reflect an intimate knowledge of the night's challenges. You imagine yourself fumbling through these routines, fumbling with tools, misplacing objects, or simply being unaware of the threats that exist in darkness. Survival requires careful observation and steady habits. Sleep itself is a challenge. Beds are simple. Straw-filled mattresses, thin blankets, perhaps a wooden frame, and few pillows. The cold can creep in through walls, doors, and windows, and the occasional screech, howl, or shuffle can disrupt even the most exhausted mind. Yet there is a rhythm to night, the slow exhalation of activity, the gentle hush of life, and the constant, subtle preparation for the next day. You probably wouldn't last a day if your body expected modern warmth, soundproofing, and uninterrupted rest. Here, sleep is earned through routine, endurance, and an acceptance of imperfection. As the night deepens, the village seems to hum with a quiet energy. You notice a few lights flickering from distant windows, suggesting late-night chores or small acts of devotion. Occasionally, a figure moves along the street with careful steps, wrapped in cloak or shawl. You imagine yourself trying to navigate in darkness, aware that even minor misjudgments could have consequences. The night is both protective and exposing. It hides some dangers, but amplifies others. In these moments, reflection becomes easier. You think back over the day: travel, labor, play, law, faith, animals, and realize how each thread interweaves with the next, creating the subtle, persistent rhythm of medieval life. Nightfall amplifies the complexity, demanding both attention and patience. You probably wouldn't last a day ignoring this rhythm, nor could you approach it casually. Yet by observing, you start to understand its logic, its pacing, and its quiet beauty. Finally, as your eyelids grow heavy, you let the gentle cadence of the village lull you. Fires flicker low, the occasional animal stirs, and a soft wind whispers through the streets. You realize that, despite all its hardships, there's a comforting predictability in this nightly rhythm. The lessons of the day, vigilance, observation, adaptation, fade into the soft pulse of life continuing quietly around you. You exhale slowly, letting the sounds, smells, and movements blend into a calming lullaby. Here, in the fading glow of torchlight and candle flame, it's clear that surviving a day in medieval times requires more than strength or skill. It requires patience, awareness, and respect for the world and all its chaotic, beautiful detail. And though you probably wouldn't last a full day, tonight, at least, you can rest in the imagination of what life might have been like, carried gently into sleep by the rhythm of a world both strange and alive. Now, let's slow the pace even further. Imagine the village hushed under a velvet sky. Stars pricking faint points of light through the thin layer of clouds. The air cools against your skin, soft and steady, carrying the earthy scent of damp stone and distant firewood. Each breath is slower, gentler, and you feel yourself sinking into the rhythm of night, the gentle cadence of life winding down around you. Hearths crackle softly, sending faint warmth into cold corners. Chickens are tucked in, cats curl beside dozing humans, and even the larger animals settle into stillness, their movements minimal and predictable. The village exhales, and you exhale with it, feeling the tension of observation, imagination, and day-long wandering slowly dissipate. You notice the subtle sounds, the scrape of a chair, the whisper of a curtain in the breeze, a soft cough from an upstairs room, each one grounding you in this slower, quieter world. Let your thoughts drift, unhurried, like smoke curling from a chimney into the night sky. You've glimpsed the texture of medieval life, the smells, the sounds, the touch of straw and stone, the unpredictability of creatures and neighbors. You've seen labor, play, faith, and law, and now all those vivid images fade gently, leaving a soft outline, a comfortable hum in your mind. Imagine your eyelids heavy, your body supported by the gentle pull of night, and feel the day's imagined hardships dissolve into warmth and calm. The world outside is still alive, but its pulse, slow, deliberate, reassuring. Let the imagined village cradle you, the rhythm of survival softened into the rhythm of rest. You are safe, held by the night's quiet embrace and carried gently toward dreams that wander through cobblestone streets, flickering candles, and the soft shuffle of life in a medieval village. Slowly you drift, carried on the whisper of history, into a deep, restful sleep. Sweet dreams.